We are pretty much on schedule. I'm surprised. Everyone was close to be on the point. The last presentation today, we have a shared, more or less, theme together. Fabian Hecker from Zaha Hadid and we have quite some history, which is longer than 6 months, I would say. And we exchanged a lot about this and that, and we just shared a little bit about topics concerning all of us, here and there, in private life, personally, in family, but also in friends. It happens, cancer. And when we sit together and we have exchanged us a little bit what we could do to accelerate a little bit activities, not only to cure, not to prolong, but maybe to heal. We have come across an idea, sharing efforts, giving us more or less the hand and developing something further, which is a Keller product, the pivot door, but making it a one of its kind. A wall opening which will be built once and never again. And this door will be donated, and the donation goes to the Fondation Cancer de Luxembourg. Okay? More about the idea behind. Fabian goes into the details, and thank you so much, Fabian, to really, together that we took it and that you said it's a good theme. I try and I will, and we proceed. And thanks a lot for this. Fabian, thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Yes, as Werner mentioned, when he approached us to collaborate with Keller Windows on this charity project, we were very happy to do that. It's something that we do as a company, continuously support charity, and so that was something we very happily agreed to doing. But also, he gave us a task, and he mentioned, he alluded to that already, to design. But before I come to that, maybe briefly about our company. Of those of you who may not know, Zaha Hadid Architects, it was founded more than 40 years ago in London as a small studio, and it has grown into an international global company. We employ more than 500 staff at the moment, and our founder sadly passed away in 2016, but the company is continuing and is continuing in her memory, but also with a strong will to continue her ideas and spread them and develop them further, obviously. There we go. So we do work across all scales and all types, and I should add, we also work globally on these scales and types. And so it was initially a natural thing to take something on that has the scale of a door, which obviously sits more at this end of the kind of projects that we do. And specifically a pivot door. And then it seemed straightforward when we started, but then we looked at our records and our projects, and we found out that actually we rarely ever design a door. And then we started thinking about why is that the case? And I believe the nature of our architecture is obviously very expressive, and this expressiveness also extends to the way you approach a building, the way you enter a building. So a lot happens, to say it bluntly, before you get to the door, actually. And the door, the actual threshold into the building, then becomes something less important, and it is less symbolic, and it has less architectural value, because a lot has happened, as I mentioned, before you actually get to this point. So our doors are very, very, very simple always. So all of a sudden it became a challenge to design a door. And a door is one of the archetypes of architecture, and you can't have a door without a wall, which is another archetype of architecture. And traditionally, at least in Western architecture, the wall had two functions, right? It supported the roof, so it was structural, it was something that was very solid, and it also protected. It protected against the elements, but it also protected my space from your space, outside from inside, private from public. So the door was very much part of this setup that you see here, Palazzo Pitti in Florence. if you look to other cultures, it was slightly different. So this is a traditional Japanese house. You can see that the wall is dissolved. It's a frame structure, so the walls are not structural. The structure is taken up by the beams and the columns. And that allowed the opening of the walls and this really close relationship between inside and outside. And the door no longer has this protective function. While it has a protective function, it's not bound by the structural capacity of the wall around. It has a lightness, and it becomes more playful. And that arrived with the arrival of modern architecture. That also arrived on a global scale, and all of a sudden, these concepts of the dissolution of walls became very, very popular. Obvious example, Barcelona Pavilion, Mies van der Rohe in Barcelona. So what's the difference to a regular door, for us at least? A regular door, as I mentioned before, has a certain history of what we consider a regular door, a framed door. It sits in the wall, is expressed, often is slightly recessed into the wall, so it's an element in its own, which, as I said, is part of a whole elevation. A pivot door is effectively a piece of wall that pivots or moves, and it is frameless, and as such it is completely, or it has the potential to be completely integrated into a wall elevation. And that's the aspect that we are obviously very interested in. You can actually see it here when you enter this room, as an example. So the potential of pivoting wall elements and using this to start dissolving walls and making walls from being static to something that becomes dynamic was maybe best tested and executed in this project by Stephen Hall Architects in New York, storefront gallery. Here you see it in its closed state, and here you see various different scenarios where this gallery opens. It opens onto the pavement, the wall dissolves, inside and outside become one, and it constantly changes. So it's a very, very dynamic setup. All of a sudden, as I said, the wall is not static but dynamic. So what that does mean for the door that we're designing for Keller windows. There are certain themes that we wanted to explore, themes that we look at in our architecture, and we also were looking for in this wall design. We wanted to express this dynamic element of the door. So not only does it move, it's a dynamic piece of wall, but also as it moves, it changes its appearance. Depending on the angle that you look at the door, it would appear differently. It would appear more or less transparent, maybe, more or less dark, more or less reflective. So and another aspect that we needed to look at was the specificity of this particular system, which is, it is a system, so the size of the door was not fixed. It can be scaled up and down, up to 3 meters high, 1.8 meters wide. So whatever we designed had to be scalable, if you like, without changing or jeopardizing the design language and the topics that we wanted to convey. The other thing that was important to us, I mentioned that before, we saw that less as a door, but more as part of a wall. So it wanted to be extendable, repeatable. It wanted to be part of an elevation, ideally. So that's another driver for the kind of motifs that we're looking at to design this particular door. Another aspect was we wanted to give it a certain depth. So not something two-dimensional, but something three-dimensional. So we started with these motifs that we started to peel the solid surfaces, start peeling away and revealing something that is behind to create this depth, but also to create, we'll see that later, this change in appearance. On the inside, if you like, on the other side of the door, the opposite happens. And this is how it looks from one side and from the other. And when you rotate the door, you can see, or I hope you can see, how the appearance of the door changes. It's never the same. Depending on its position, it looks different. One of the joys of our architecture that we do is always very complex geometries, and not maybe the first conversation we have, but certainly the second conversation we have is about making that buildable, rationalizing geometries, making it more cost-effective. So we've started doing that here as well. We started to build in repetition into the door. It's based on a grid. We looked at some technical issues, integrating things like the door lock, the pull handle. So the aim is to design something that is fully integrated and fully designed, obviously. I mentioned before that we very much like the idea of this being part of a wall rather than a standalone door. So we did some studies what that could mean. So we're playing with a different, sorry, I should go back. So the base case here is a repetition of that particular motif, as you see. We then started rotating the door, so what you see here is the inside, what I call the inside before the outside element. You have a different rhythm by simply rotating that. Here we have just mirrored the motif, and all of a sudden you get an elevation that looks very different again, without changing the panel, literally just changing its position. Then we started looking at what does it mean if some of these panels open. So this is a scenario where actually you can open two of them to have a larger opening. Again, you can see how the appearance changes every time that element moves. We've looked at integrating clear glass as well, so to make this a bit more transparent, almost becomes a screen more than maybe a traditional door, which looks completely different at night. When it shines from the inside, it's more like a lantern maybe. We've also looked at integrating artificial light to accentuate the geometry, and also in combining both and see what that does. We've looked ahead a little bit, playing around, saying, well, it's a door, it's pivoting, you don't need a frame, so why do we need straight edges? You don't really, geometrically you don't. I'm sure Keller will think differently from an engineering point of view, but we nevertheless, we just like thinking about it and think, what if this becomes more a sculptural wall, a dynamic and sculptural wall than maybe just an opening or a door. This is just a scenario if you were to repeat it, and obviously you can dissolve the entire wall and have a seamless connection from inside to outside. Finally, we looked at materiality. We looked at different options. What we have shown in the renders here is what we think is probably going to be a metal option in a very light color, a white, and a bronze or a gold inlay, but the same design could be also executed with a form of natural stone, with maybe some metal inlays or an old timber version on the very left. So it's not fixed. We see a certain versatility also there that the design allows. This is a close-up render of some of the details. Going to be a benchmark for the finished door. I'm curious to see that. Thanks for the challenge. Yeah, thank you very much. This is where we are in the process. We're very happy to have had the opportunity to design this door with and for Keller. We first hope that it's going to be a great success for the charity project. We want to raise as much money as possible. But then we are obviously extremely curious to see the final result, see it built, see it in the flesh, and see it installed. Thank you very much.
Fabian, thank you. And I mean, we have had some ideas. You had a lot of ideas about how that three-dimensional wall panel could look like, but then it was this design. Do you remember why it was this design which was chosen for that charity event?
Well, I think so. We should say that we explored several ideas, and we had, as Werner mentioned, we had a session. We discussed them, and very quickly, all present in this meeting converged on this particular design, which is very rare. It's almost something where you start scratching your head if something is wrong. But I don't think there's anything wrong with this design in this case. I think what was interesting in that conversation, you saw something in it which we didn't. And that's the exciting thing about designing, that we bring a certain idea and we create a certain shape or form or door in this case, and then people react to it, and they react in a way that we totally cannot foresee, and it might be a completely different story for everyone. So I think maybe it's more appropriate that you explain what you found.
But maybe we together, we go back, Marco, maybe on the presentation, on the slide where this white and the golden part is just shown. Maybe you can go back to the presentation, Marco.
Just the wall, please.
Just the wall then, yeah. I'm a mechanical engineer, so I'm not a designer, I'm not an architect. I apologize for that one. I had headaches when I saw the design because I know Ralf couldn't immediately that he said, ooh, how should we realize that one? And when we have discussed, Paulina was with us as well, and another colleague from Zaha Hadid, and we have been through a lot of options, 10 in total. And then we have said we go about a kind of charity event on cancer research to support the institutions. And I mean, then we are thrown a little bit why, and then the color was pretty easy. White is innocent. People being attached by that kind of illness, they can't do anything. They just got it, innocent. Then we have thought, I mean, all of them are golden to us, a piece of gold. So more or less this gives us also a kind of feeling that how precious the life is. The lucky number 3 is something which is spectacular. And when you then just mirror this to the other side, you have 3 holding hands in golden. So we were just throwing, what could it mean if you just see the wall in front of you? And this was then the easy choice for all of us in the meeting, to say this should be the selection for the charity event. And the auction will start before Christmas. On the 28th of February, we will broadcast the last 1 hour of the auction process. And whoever wants to auction and donate, the guy, the lady, whoever it is, with the biggest, more or less, quote, get this one of its kind, and it will never be repeated a second time. Okay? So where you just bring it out, publish it, and the whole amount is donated to the Luxembourg Cancer Research Institution. Okay? So let's see, and for the production, Fabian, you will be part of it. We are not doing it ourselves. I mean, we have to see how architects react when something becomes in this very, very complex, but I know you did it already because you have optimized the system, but you will be in Traverse and we will be in the workbench and do it together with our partners. Thank you so much.
Looking forward. Thank you very much. Thank you.